Hi there, this is the third in our series of videos on Delta Module 1 feedback, and this one will be on Paper 2. And Paper 2 is where a lot of you fell down for different reasons, but we'll quickly go through the summary. Task 1 is where you have to analyse the exam. Not too bad, a lot of you did quite well here, but make sure you're using appropriate headings, check out the model answer for the kind of headings you want to be using. Make sure you've got both positive and negative points, and describe your points in clear and concise ways. So we're looking for the precision that I mentioned earlier. Don't get too wordy here. Use a nice sprinkling of exam-related terminology, negative washback, fresh starts, construct validity, face validity, reliability, and so on. Don't use these as the headings. Apparently, it's not a good idea according to the exam report. But use these in your responses when you're describing some of the positive and negative points. My advice for you here would be to write down a list of questions you could use to analyze any test. So these are kind of common sense questions from a teacher's or examiner's point of view. So is the test reliable? Is it valid? Is it appropriate for the level? Is it a direct test or an indirect test? Are there clear instructions? Are there fresh starts? What kinds of tasks does it have? Are these tasks valid? Are there relevant topics? And so on. So any kind of brainstorm some questions that you feel that you could use to analyze any of the tests and use them to evaluate the test provided. In terms of learner application, make sure they're linked to the negative or positive points. It's much easier to score that way. So every positive point, you have a learner application, and the same applies for the negative points as well. So point, good, bad, point, and then the learner application immediately after. With the learner application, start the sentence head, the learner will or the learner won't. You could also say the teacher will or the teacher won't, and also apply it to the learner. So for example, you might want to say there are clear instructions, so that could be one of your positive points, clear instructions. So the learner application will be the learner will be clear in understanding the test. The learner will know exactly how to approach the test, and this will affect face validity positively and also reliability of the results. Something like that. Check out this isn't that intuitive. I would say that it's one of the trickiest to get your head around. So lots and lots of try and check out the exam reports, these kind of questions, and that will give you an idea of what the examiner is expecting here. But it's not difficult. It's not difficult at all. But you just need to understand what the examiner is looking for and respond with the correct format and content. Okay, number 2, task 2. Quite a few lost a lot of marks here for a number of reasons. The part A was okay. You explicitly linked the exercise with a purpose. Try and use precise terminology. Remember that you are the level of your career. You should be able to use the terminology in quite a precise way. So use precise terminology. For example, activate schemata or focus on form. You could use stuff like controlled practice, free practice. Nothing too difficult, but just make sure you've got that terminology up your sleeve. And this kind of is like the right when you write your stage aims of a lesson. So what would be the stage aim of each of the activities if it was down on a lesson plan? So think of it in terms of what is the stage aim of the activity, and you can't really go wrong. B was less successful. And the reason why is because you're not mentioning both activities. So you need to mention the activity you're referring to. So for example, 1A, and also the activity that it's linked to. For example, 1B or 1C. So you might say, so 1A encourages a focus on form and analysis of form, and this relates to activity 1C, which then encourages practice of the form in a freer context. It's not a great example, I know, but do you see what I mean? So you have to mention both, and it's all about sequencing. So thinking about why are these sequences in this particular order? Yeah. So rather than individual purposes, you're thinking about sequencing, and this might give it draws on your knowledge of lesson sequencing, so like sequencing a listening lesson or a speaking lesson, a PPP lesson, a test teach test lesson, a task-based lesson, but thinking about why these things are in the order that they are and linking explicitly. So mention the activity and also the activity that it links to as well, and then you can't go wrong. The last one was quite weak as well, and essentially this is a format issue. So basically what you need to do is in task 2C is you need to think about three things: the assumption, and then you need to think about the rationale behind the assumption, and then mention the activity. So for example, one of the things you could do is when you're writing the assumption, so you look at the activity and you say, okay, the assumption is learners learn better when. The learners learn better when they're cognitively involved. Learners learn better when there is a focus on form. Learners will acquire language more if there's a conscious noticing of the target language. And then what you want to do is you want to do the rationale. So this is because, or the writers probably think that, and then you need to think about why has the writer decided to include this activity? What aspect of language acquisition does this shed light on? And this is where a lot of you went wrong. You really need to kind of get your terminology in here, be precise. Remember, it's a delta qualification, it's not a CELTA. So make sure you really kind of put a sprinkling of nice terminology and reference to methodology here. Again, try and look at the end of the module examiner's report, the module 1 examiner's report 2015, to see what the examiner is looking for. Again, I found a lot of your answers were a little bit superficial and didn't really go into enough depth that the examiner is looking for here. Don't be scared to mention name drop here. So, for example, you might want to talk about affective filters and Krashen. You might want to talk about task-based learning and Prabhu, for example. But if you've got some some sources up your sleeve, don't be afraid to stick them in. Finally, number 3, lots of scoring points, but unfortunately it was the depth criteria that you lost marks on. We haven't really looked at the depth criteria. Maybe we should have done more on this. But if you go to your handbook, your module 1 handbook, you'll find the depth criteria, and I really think you spend the time looking at that and familiarizing yourself with exactly what your criteria should be. So your depth criteria basically is looking at, I think it's on page 17 in the Delta module handbook, is looking at drawing on your experience, examples, context, theory, sources. So that's the key, and these marks are doubled. So a lot of you are scoring 30 points in terms of the breadth of marks, but not adding enough depth to get the full 40 marks for this activity. As I said to a lot of you, this can sometimes be a trade-off. So the more breadth, the less depth; the more depth, the less breadth. But check out some of the responses, some of the high-scoring responses, and you'll see the kind of thing that you need to be doing for a distinction level. And often this is the difference between merits and distinctions, this idea of depth, really going to town on showing off to the examiner what you've got. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Good luck with the exam. I'm sure you'll do really well. Please get in touch if you have any other questions or concerns or doubts. Thank you once again for submitting your work on time and always have a high quality. And I'll keep my fingers crossed on June the 5th. And just again, hopefully, we hope that the Delta gods are smiling down at you and will give you a wonderful some easy questions and a focus which really kind of ties into your professional interests and background. Okay, it's not the greatest video of all time, but I think it's probably the most effective way of getting feedback to you as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Thank you very much. Bye bye.